All right, what's going on, guys? All right, so today we are going to just pretty much sum up a lot of our federalism unit, and we're going to look at how the government can impact federalism, right? So we're going to hit the main points, right? So this will be the last part of the notes for chapter 3 before we take our test. So what we're going to focus on today on how the government impacts federalism is we're going to talk about the Constitution itself and how does it tip the tide between the states and or tip the tide in favor of the federal government. Then we're going to look at the amendments to the Constitution. We'll talk about a few Supreme Court cases, which we've already looked at. Again, we're just going to go back over them and summarize them real quickly, and then also some laws, right? So we're going to start off talking about tipping the scale in favor of the national government. So where in the Constitution do we see this? First and foremost, Article 1, Section 8, with enumerated powers, right? These are powers expressly stated in the Constitution given to the federal government, okay? So those powers, like the necessary and proper clause, the commerce clause, they allow Congress to stretch its powers. That's why they're called the elastic clause, right? So all those things, express powers, all that, all in the Constitution, give the federal government its powers. Plus the supremacy clause in Article 6 of the Constitution basically says federal law trumps state law. All right, so that's how the Constitution itself, if we look at amendments, also part of the Constitution, the Civil War amendments. Right. So after the Civil War, this is where we're going to start see shifting from dual federalism into cooperative. It's going to be a slow change, but the main change is going to happen until 1930s with FDR. This is the start of it, though. So with the 13th Amendment freeing the slaves, the southern states now, had to scramble and come up with a new way. They lost the states' rights to have slavery. So therefore, that gave the national government power. The 14th Amendment, huge with federalism, because the 14th Amendment, we always been told it gives equal protection under the law, made everybody citizens. But there's also the incorporation clause, which basically states that states have to incorporate the Federal Bill of Rights into state constitutions. So therefore, that is going to give the national government more power over the states, right? And then, also in the 14th Amendment, it's going to talk about like defining civil liberties, defining civil rights, right? So therefore, the 14th Amendment usually ties into a lot of Bill of Rights cases in the Supreme Court. So the 14th Amendment is probably the most important amendment after the First Amendment. So then we're going to talk about that when we hit civil rights and civil liberties, but it is huge. It is very important. Other amendments, the last Civil War Amendment, the 15th, gave African-American men the right to vote. So therefore, states could not deny African-American men the right to vote. But as we know, they had loopholes with poll taxes and literacy tests and things like that. But that again favored the national government over the states. Then we have our voting amendments. The 15th, which we just talked about. The 19th gave women the right to vote. Woo woo, right? I just saw a shirt the other day on a woman that said, women voting since 1920. I was like, oh, that's cute. But anyway, the 19th gave women the right to vote, so states cannot deny women the right to vote. The 22nd, which this one really isn't a voting amendment. I believe that's supposed to be the 24th. The 24th got rid of poll taxes. So the 22nd limit the president to 2 terms. That might be a typo in our notes right there. But, other voting amendments, the 24th gets rid of poll taxes, and then the 26th lowers the voting age from 21 to 18. That was due to the Vietnam War. So states cannot deny 18 to 21-year-olds the right to vote because, during that progressive era time, they were fighting for, or, saying like, hey, I can buy a lottery ticket. I can gamble. I can die for my country. I can get drafted and die for my country. And at that time, 18-year-olds could buy beer. And they said, I can do all this, but I can't vote for my president? Well, they pushed it through. Congress pushed the amendment through. States ratified it. Boom. Lowered the voting age to 18. All right. Laws. The American with Disabilities Act, right? So we talked about mandates, right? So the federal government can put mandates into the states saying, hey, you got to make sure you take care of people with disabilities. You got to have parking spots. You got to have automatic doors. You got to have wheelchair ramps. Stalls big enough in your bathrooms. Yada yada yada. All that stuff for the American Disability Act, which is very good. It's huge, but that gives more power to the federal government. And again, a lot of those are given in unfunded mandates. The Civil Rights Act of 64 ties in to what should be the 24th Amendment up here. So as the 24th Amendment gets rid of poll taxes, the Civil Rights Act gets rid of literacy tests, right? So therefore now there should be no hindrance to the right to vote. But as you know, right now today, that's still a really, really big issue. So, voting, counting, mail-in ballots, all that stuff. So it's still kind of relevant today. But, will there be laws that we see in the future that are going to tip the scale inside of the national government when it comes to voting and mail-in voting? All right, let's talk about Supreme Court cases. McCulloch v. Maryland, right? So you remember that the federal bank was created and put in the state of Maryland. Maryland tried to tax the bank, and then so basically they sue the clerk from the bank, and then eventually the case goes all the way to the Supreme Court. And what we find out is that states cannot tax the federal government. The federal government cannot tax the states, right? So that's going to favor the federal government, saying, "Hey, states, you're not as powerful as you think you are." Gibbons versus Ogden, right? So Gibbons, got a permit from one of the states between New Jersey and New York to ferry boats back and forth across the harbor. And then all of a sudden Ogden started doing it. Gibbons like, "Hey man, you're stealing my business." And then so he tried to sue him and it got denied, yada, yada. We make all our way up to the Supreme Court. And basically the Supreme Court favored Ogden and said, "Hey, Gibbons, yeah, you have a permit, but that's from one state, but you're going between states. So therefore, that is the power to regulate interstate commerce. That's a federal government issue. So Ogden, go ahead and ferry your boats, buddy." So Ogden won. Good for him. Sucks to be Gibbons. All right, so those are some the Supreme Court cases that favor the national government. Now we're going to tip the scale in favor of the states. Where do we see that in the Constitution? Article 4, we have full faith and credit clause, privileges and immunities, right? So states must have full faith and credit in each other. Privileges and immunities, states, there are a lot of privileges that you have in some states that you don't have in others. So that, again, that's what the people of that state want, and things that they might have voted on, issues that might have been passed. So therefore, that's where we see those. Article 4 is known as the states' rights part. That's part of the federalism. Amendments, we look at 9 and 10. Amendment 9 basically says anything it's not stated in the Constitution doesn't mean you don't have a right to it. So, I always give the example of like air. We have a right to air, we have a right to breathe, we have a right to oxygen, right? Just because it's not in the Constitution doesn't mean we have that right. We don't have that right. The 10th Amendment. Right? This is the Federalism Amendment. This one is big. The 10th Amendment is huge. The 10th and the 14th are very big when it comes to federalism. Right? The 10th Amendment, anything not stated in the Constitution given to the federal government is therefore left up to the states and or to the people. Right? So this is where states can set their own speed limits, set their own requirements for license, driver's license, marriage license, hunting license, so on and so forth. So, this made the anti-federalists super happy, the 9th and the 10th Amendment, to, basically say, hey, states, you still have some rights. And therefore, because that's what the anti-federalists favored, the states' rights, this helped them approve and ratify the Constitution. So this was big. Supreme Court case of Lopez versus the United States in 1995. Remember, Lopez brought a gun to school in San Antonio, and he got caught, he got suspended, he got expelled, right? Then they tried to appeal it. Next thing you know, it ends up in court, and then it goes all the way to the Supreme Court. And then the United States government tried to claim that Lopez was allowed to bring that gun, even though that the courts passed the gun school zone free act, something like that, a few years prior. And so therefore, but the federal government said, hey, that's commerce, right? Lopez is bringing that gun because he's protected under the Commerce Clause. But the Supreme Court said, nah, federal government, you're too big for your britches. Right? You cannot do that. So therefore, that favored the states, saying the federal government, you can't claim the Commerce Clause to bring guns to school. That's not cool. All right, so other laws, right? The Clean Water Act. So this is, along with the Welfare Reform Act, this is part of the devolution transferring powers back to the state because the federal government gets so big and so bogged down. So the Clean Water Act, it's up to the states to set their own standards for clean water. So remember we talked about like Ohio River and our drinking water starts in Pittsburgh. They flush toilet. Yeah, you remember. And then the Welfare Reform Act of 1996, right? This is where they give it in the form of block grants. Federal government said, here's a block grant. States distribute the welfare how you would like to your constituents. Right? So we talked about that's why some of them have different requirements and provide different services for their welfare programs to their citizens. So that's therefore going to favor the states again when distributing and having the rights to give welfare, clean water, clean air, so on and so forth. All right. So these graphics are old, but you get the point. Look, like this is from 2002. The average monthly welfare grant for a family. So basically, you see all the different colors, and here's our key down here. But with all the different colors, you just kind of see how basically like the cost of living for each state. So some states residents get more, some states residents get less. It's because of the cost of living and all those different variables, or maybe the state decides like they don't need that much. Trying to maybe help people get back to work. It's all up to each state legislature to decide. So, the point is you get to see the different colors, the different costs. Again, this is 18 years old, right? This graphic is older than you guys. All right. Same way with this one, public education, right? So different states spend different amount of money per pupil in education. So a lot of different factors go into that, right? So what are the standards for that state? Because education is left up to the state. Are they following federal guidelines? Do they need more resources to implement programs and things like that? Or do they need more help to improve their education? So you can see, how much they spend per pupil, and it makes a big deal, makes a big difference, right? So you can kind of see, and again, this is really old graphics, but you can see different states spend different amounts of money on each individual student when it comes to education. All right. So again, understanding federalism, just remember the division of powers between state, local, and federal government. So you have all the different levels right here. We have 87,576 different governments. Remember, we talked about the advantages and disadvantages, right? So of having so many governments, there's some disadvantages to our system as well. No system is perfect. But, this is something that is uniquely American. And the different levels of government are good or bad. How you look at it. Understanding federalism in the scope of government, which level of government is best able to solve the problem, right? So we don't know. Is the state better to solve the problem? Is the federal government better to solve the problem? And then also, which level of government is best able to fund solutions to the problem? Nobody has any money to fund any of these solutions, right? Old saying in government, you think our problems are bad, wait till you see our solutions, right? But as we know, and as I told you, is we're going to find out more and more as we delve into the course that everything can be tied back to money. But which level of government is best able to fund the solutions to these problems, right? That's a good thing to understand. And the system of checks and balances in the U.S. federal government, right? So this kind of goes back to chapter 1 or whatnot, and I'll let you go ahead and look over that. You can pause the video right here. But this is going to conclude chapter 3 of federalism. All right, so let's make sure we're caught up on all assignments. And again, if you have any questions, you can ask me. Yeah, I hope you guys have a great day, and I'll talk to you soon.